Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received is the place, the home, the platform to help you find your best, most true, authentic business voice. Get what you want, find what you need, improve your results, meet the person of your dreams, make billions of dollars. We really feel confident this year we're going to hit those last two goals, but we can't promise them just yet. But in the meantime, the reason this show is doing what it's doing, the whole purpose and point is that we bring people on who walk the walk. Anyone to me who has a legit arc to authenticity is someone that I feel adds value, and I know that you'll find the same when I introduce you to author, rugby player, absolutely solid communications guru, Tyler Kania. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I love the fact, I'll lead right into that I've got someone here, cybersecurity salesperson, rugby player, coach, entrepreneur, and all that stuff, but is also one of the more transparent people that I've encountered so far. And that to me is what excites me. I love the fact that someone who has written a book called The Maniac with No Knees, which by the way is out right now on Amazon, and describes a book with a lot of dark components as exciting. Tyler, I'll ask you right off the bat, what was the reason that you felt compelled to write the book?
Yeah, it's a funny story because I didn't really set out to write a book at all.
Yep.
You know, I ruptured my patellar tendon for the second time in my life, which is a very rare injury. It happens once for every 147,000 human years. And I've actually done it to both of my knees. And so what happens basically is your knee goes into your quad. And so, because I have a history of substance abuse, my parents kind of withheld my painkillers. This was all this past spring, this past April. And so I went manic. It was my first manic episode since I had been released from institutionalization. And a lot of times manic episodes can lead to really bad things. But it does give you some superpowers, right? You get total inhibition of, you don't care what anyone thinks, and your energy is through the roof, and you're willing to just do anything to reach your goal. The bad news is you don't see risks.
No.
You act irrationally. And you get feelings of grandiose. And a lot of times, that absence of risk tolerance gets you in the end. But in this particular case, I was manic and I was bedridden. And I just started opening up the Notes app on my iPhone and telling my life story to my followers on Instagram. And I had never been someone to share on Instagram. I had always been ashamed of who I was. But that manic episode took that shame and it threw it out the window. So I was hospitalized. And when I got out of the hospital the next day, I had all this encouragement from friends, from followers, from former rugby teammates, from everyone. And I kind of realized that, okay, maybe my dreams of taking over the rugby world this year aren't going to happen, but maybe I can find, something in the void. And that was writing this book.
Oh my God, something in the void. It's a beautiful, a little bit scary expression, but beautifully stated. Talk to me a little bit, because that's a lot, and I'm grateful that you are that open and transparent. So you were institutionalized.
Yeah.
What was the cause of that in your mind?
Yeah. Well, it was a long series of events. Basically, in 2021, I had attempted suicide.
Okay.
And the very next week, I went to a rugby birthday party, ended up getting dragged to a rugby game the next week, and assisted the game-winning score the first time I touched the ball in 5 years. I quit rugby after my first manic episode, after I had ruptured my first patellar tendon.
Right.
And so this was kind of coming back into the sport. From there, I got a head coaching job of the Eastern Connecticut State University women's rugby team.
Hmm.
We won a championship, and I felt like all the pain that I'd been in, all the suffering had been for this, and I had finally found my calling.
Hmm.
During that off season, I tried to start a crypto company,
Hmm.
and I went and pitched it to all these venture capitalists and technologists
Hmm.
out in Denver at the largest crypto conference. Um, and I came back. I was manic. I had a manic episode again, and I basically trusted the wrong guy, and I was hacked for $450,000. The next day, I went to rugby practice, and I was still manic, still out of my mind, lost control of myself, and I was well, I wasn't fired, but I had to leave that job. And that sent me down into a pretty bad hole of depression, suicidal thoughts, and all of that. But after like 6 weeks, that suicide ideation kind of gave way to another manic episode, which sent me down to the South. First, I played rugby for my college roommates team in Nashville. Then I went down to Memphis and got a job coaching the Memphis Inner City Youth Rugby Club, largest inner city rugby club in America. I was tasked with U19 boys in the most dangerous
Hmm.
neighborhood in America.
Hmm.
But my fourth day there, I had a panic attack and I just started taking all kinds of medications, like just gobbling up dozens. And I ended up having to get flown back to Connecticut, and I was hospitalized with serotonin syndrome for 3 days.
What's that?
That's when you have too much serotonin in your brain from
Oh,
antidepressants and stuff like that.
okay.
It
Okay.
can lead to death. But I was lucky that that didn't happen. But for the subsequent month after that, I was pretty lost in life. I was very suicidal, and
Mhm.
finally, I got some coaching from a psychiatrist who um, had me just go into the ER and say, "Hey, look, I've tried suicide once. I'm going to try it again." And that's kind of my path to institutionalization. That's my path to being formally diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder,
Mm.
and my path to
Mhm.
being prescribed finally after dozens of different medications.
Mhm.
I was giving lithium, which has saved my life.
So, did you ever feel at that time when you were given dozens of medications, right? And I'm imagining that that had to have been pretty frustrating for you, a trial and error sort of thing. Was it? Or were you feeling as if I'm just going to do whatever it takes at that time?
No, no, it was traumatizing.
Hmm.
Some of the side effects were really traumatizing.
Can you give me an example?
I we had tried so many different things that
Right.
my psychiatrist went with an early stage, not in not in like Walgreens or CVS, not in pharmacies,
Hmm.
drug. He basically would get it from his sales rep at the pharmaceutical company, and I would have to go to his office to pick it up. And it turned me gay for 2 months.
Okay, as I am a gay man, I can't just let that sit and slide. What do you mean it turned you gay?
I mean, I've always been straight,
Okay.
and
So what happened? I mean, what was it in your, and I mean you, not in your mind, you. Because again, as I said, I'm an avid believer that there was no choice in my life in regards to what it is and what it isn't. For me, as a gay man, I fought it off for a lot of years because I didn't want it for me, although I was fine with anyone else who was. So I always find that curious. So what was it like for you?
it was traumatizing. It was the worst feeling ever because I had known who I was. I was
Mm-hmm.
positive of who I was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, a chemical reaction changed me.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I stopped taking it, it stopped.
Wow.
So, huh?
I'm saying wow in the sense
Yeah.
that as soon as you stopped taking it, and this is, if I heard you correctly, a non-pharmacy or I'm going to say non-regulated sort of a drug where you went to the salesperson's office as opposed to
My
going
psychiatrist's office, who got it from the salesman. Yeah.
who got it from the salesperson. Thanks, man. But there's no checkpoint in going CVS or Walgreens or whatever at the time, right?
Yeah, I think they're still in a trial phase
Hmm.
of it. Um, I don't know where it's gone from there. I didn't really
Right.
reveal my symptoms. I just said it
Mhm.
wasn't working.
Did that shut you down, those 2 months? And when you knew it changed again, what went on in your mind?
No, I mean, just like the whole time, like
Mhm.
I'm fighting suicide,
Right,
and
right.
that's my number one concern, and
Hmm.
that's what was really killing me. And
Hmm. Hmm.
to layer it on top with
Hmm.
something else was just, it was horrifying.
Hmm.
And, it didn't help the depression at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
And going through different medications
Hmm.
was really frustrating because I
Hmm.
just wanted an answer and nothing seemed to help.
Yeah. Yeah. You said it, and I just forgive me for asking a second time. How long was that cycle? What was the
Um,
timeline of that
Ultimately,
cycle?
I had been cycling from early 2021
Right.
through fall 2022.
That's a long time.
Yeah,
Uh,
painful.
Obviously, you know that better than me, but I was going to say I asked that because of so many people that go through the cycle, so to speak, right? I want
Well,
to also,
you gotta give a medication like 3 months to see if it's actually effective, and so then
Mhm,
when you move from one to the next, okay,
mhm.
now it's been half a year and
Yeah.
it adds up pretty quickly.
Yeah, man. You had said earlier, and I wanted to go back to it, so it just didn't, fly past, which is the 1 in 147,000 number that you utilized in terms of the patella and the way that it activates by losing your knee into your quad, so to speak, right? In your mind, how did, or I'm sorry, I'll say that better. In whatever, in any which way, how did you get through that first run? What was it in, how were you able to power through to know that you were going to continue?
I didn't, well, before it happened, I thought I was going to be like a pro rugby player or something like
Oh, yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah.
And I
Mm-hmm.
had, all these high ambitions and it was my identity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At the time, I was also doing quite well in cybersecurity sales. I was making six figures at
Mm-hmm.
24,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a girlfriend that I cared dearly about. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I ruptured my first patellar
Mm-hmm.
tendon, that was my first manic episode,
Mm-hmm.
and I left all of that stuff while I was broken up with. I quit my job. I quit rugby for
Wow.
good,
Wow.
and at least for 5 years, and I moved to Idaho. And I
Mm-hmm.
just had to find distractions. And I went and visited my friend, who was building a canoe to paddle down from Montana to the Gulf of Mexico. And, it's kind of like a Jack Kerouac book. We went on adventures
Uh-huh.
across the country.
Yeah.
I almost died in the Grand Canyon. We went to University of Kansas parties and, saw the horses in Lexington and the wild horses in Wyoming. But I was just finding distractions because I had no explanation for, my behavior over the
Mm-hmm.
past couple months. I
Mm-hmm.
had completely lost my identity. And so it took a while to find that again. Eventually,
Yeah.
I kind of I got a new job at a cybersecurity company and
Mm-hmm.
did quite well. And I rented a farmhouse with like an indoor pool and an outdoor volleyball court with lights and all kinds of horses and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And, out there I started to run miles and miles and I got good at running. I won
Mm-hmm.
a 5K road race. I ran the Hartford Marathon just 13 months after my ruptured patellar tendon.
You
And
ran it.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
and I placed in the top 200. I did pretty well actually.
That's quite impressive.
Yeah,
So I would say with all of that momentum, as we'll say, and as I heard you, I believe I heard you correctly, where it's like, look, I lost my identity. I go through this Jack Kerouac cycle, which sounds, I mean, there's even though when you drop in, oh, I almost died in the Grand Canyon again, right? That you were you always a risk taker, or
I
did
think
that
so.
develop at?
Yeah, I've always been a bit of a risk taker, but
Mhm.
it's definitely exacerbated by a manic episode.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you're talking about. It's that sense of bravery or false confidence or whatever it is. But not that I would wish that on you or anyone, but still, a sense that you were able to accomplish certain things that it's very possible you wouldn't even have attempted, let alone. So,
Yeah,
not to
like my
put it
book.
like your book,
Yeah.
right? And that's what I wanted to find out. So, that's where it's like, that's to me the mark of a number of things more than just bravery, but I'll get to that shortly. I wanted to figure out before, which is because I think it's needed. Not that I need to drag you through it, but it's more the sense that I think it's needed and necessary for people to know to get a little more hope in their world, in their life. Um, I am in recovery. It was an addiction, but I am in like my recovery is alcohol, and I did plenty of drugs that were my choice. I've also, taken pharmaceutical drugs too, but uh, for the any plenty of mood altering in my life. But I'll ask you, you get through the first time. What was the length of time between recovery, meaning I completed a marathon, I've done certain things, I'm starting, I take a second new job and I'm doing well, uh, to having to go through that a second time?
Yeah. Well, the worst of my illness wasn't until much later, I
Right,
guess.
right.
You know, basically I moved to that farmhouse
Hmm.
and, I recovered a little bit, but for instance, there was this cowboy from Oklahoma who kept horses in the back of the barn.
Okay.
And he would just steal from us
Oh my
dozens
God.
of times. He entrusted his puppy with me so that he could get close to the house. And then we got caught in the middle of a domestic violence dispute between him and his girl. And the whole time I was kind of looking at this guy through a distorted mirror, and seeing how crazy
Hmm.
he was and
Hmm.
looking at my dormant
Hmm.
craziness. And I ended up moving to Boston. I was making a lot of money,
Hmm.
six figures by the time I was, um, well, a quarter million by the time I was 26.
Hmm.
And I was living on the best street in Boston, but I started to get extreme paranoia,
Hmm. Okay.
paranoia of
Hmm.
the Amazon Echo listening to my business conversations. My car got stolen, and I was paranoid that it was the Boston Mafia.
Mm.
Um, and my substance abuse spiraled out of control, so I decided that I had to move back home to Connecticut to my parents' house despite my income.
Hmm.
I just had to figure out what was going on with me. And when COVID hit, I quit my incredible job
Hmm.
that brought me my new identity once rugby had left. And I spent that entire year just reading 300 pages of literature per day. And, I didn't want to be in my world, so I traveled to someone else's world. And when that ended and I tried to get a job again after two job gaps on my short resume,
Right.
I couldn't find work. So
Hmm.
that kind of brought me to a noose around my neck at one point.
Mm.
Um, and
Mm.
that's, kind of where the second half of it all starts, I
Hmm.
guess.
Hmm. So you had said you attempted once and you knew you were going to do it again, right? I guess I'm
Well, I
curious.
guess technically twice, like if you count the
Yeah.
medication overdose in Memphis.
Intended or accidental?
It's hard to know, to be honest.
Okay. Okay.
Sometimes you think it's accidental,
Mhm.
but part of you's rooting for it.
The behaviors and thinking this wouldn't be such a bad thing.
Yeah.
Or I guess active and passive, I guess is a better way for me to say it. But for me to grasp it, that it's like, hey, if it doesn't work out, oh well.
It's
Uh,
like give me liberty or give me death.
okay.
Like maybe these medications will work if I take a ton of them, or maybe my pain will just be at rest.
And so the first time
Hmm.
you make the attempt, what stopped it from succeeding?
Yeah, it was pretty beautiful actually. Was in my room looking at the window as you can see behind me,
Yeah.
and it was like a late afternoon,
Hmm.
early spring, and the clouds parted, and the sun came out. And what I realized is that my one of my best friends was getting married the next day.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Hmm.
so I was like, might as well stick around a little longer.
Hmm.
And then, thankfully, like I mentioned earlier, the rugby party that I went to,
Yeah.
I was so ashamed to go to that party.
Hmm.
I had been their team captain. I had been the guy
Hmm.
with, we won all these championships, and I was the guy with endless confidence. And now I hadn't worked in a year. I was coming off a suicide attempt.
Hmm.
Um, but as soon as I touched that ball at that party for the first time, like all of that, confidence, all of that pride, all of that
Hmm.
passion
Hmm.
came back to me. And, you know, they convinced me to go watch their game. I went to watch, but our old college coach was then their men's team coach. And his wife, who had given me so much confidence back in college,
Hmm.
was standing next to me in the stands. And so when an injury happened late in the game, she was like, go ask him if you can go in.
No way.
It was an exhibition game, so it wasn't like anything crazy. It wasn't like
Right.
high stakes.
Yeah, but you're playing.
But yeah, so I
Um,
got onto the field and it
mhm.
all worked out from there.
What did it feel like as you're going to run out onto the field? I'm thinking, do you remember?
It was nothing but nerves. It was nothing but
Yeah.
self-consciousness.
Hmm.
I didn't even know my teammates outside of
Hmm.
four of them.
Hmm.
I didn't even, I hadn't been lifting weights. I
Hmm.
hadn't been doing anything. And let's not
Hmm.
forget the last time that I had a ball in my hands,
Hmm.
I ruptured my patellar tendon.
Exactly. So all
So
of
so
this
there's that.
testing in your head and rugby, I know a limited amount. I've got all of two friends that play. So I'm not going to act like some expert here, other than to say I am familiar. And it is, to me, if not the most, it is right toward the top of extreme physical in terms of using every bit of your body, lifting players, let alone, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so. What was the experience like as you were in?
Um, well, my position is a little less physical.
Hmm.
Typically, I play like the quarterback, the
Okay.
fly half, which,
Okay.
controls the ball, passing,
Mhm.
kicking.
Right.
But I had subbed in at outside center, which is more of like a faster guy on the field. Um, so it was all like, I knew that I still had it.
Hmm.
As soon as I touched the ball, I knew that like I could do something with it.
Hmm.
But when I did, and mind you, most of these guys didn't even know who I was.
Yeah, so they're not going
Um,
to be accommodating you, so to speak, right? They
right.
can't.
It
They don't
was it
know
was
yet.
more shock from them when like it turned out the way that it did.
Hmm.
I caught the ball and I attacked the defender and I had a 2-on-1,
Hmm.
took an inside step and I passed it and the guy was just gone. And, that was it. That was all it took to get me back into the sport. And I tell people that like,
Hmm.
if you want to overcome mental illness,
Hmm.
um, there's three things, and we're going to talk about two of them because community,
Hmm.
having people around you
Hmm.
to give you confidence is big,
Right.
and a goal. And those often come
Hmm.
hand in hand. And so with rugby,
Hmm.
all of a sudden I had a community and I had a goal and I had an identity now.
Is identity the third?
I'd say medication is the third.
Okay, so
I
that I
think
wanted to be
identity
aware
comes
of
as
the three, you know?
identity comes as being part of a group and having a goal in mind.
Right, right. So now you've got this community, an identity that ties to a community. How did that work for you?
Um, well, there was a chip on my shoulder, because I
What's the chip?
the chip was the best that never was. The guy that could have been so much and dropped it all, and now here he is out of his prime, 5 years later,
Hmm.
trying to do it again,
Hmm.
and his competitive spirit has not lapsed. That's
Okay.
still there.
Hmm. Hmm.
You you want to prove to every single person that watches you or plays with you that you're the guy,
Okay.
and that doesn't leave.
Was there any manic in that?
Any
A sense
what?
of bravery. Was there any manic in that during that stretch?
No,
Okay.
no.
This is you. This is strictly you.
That's me.
Right. That's great. So the second time it occurs, what happened?
Well, I think we talked about it already. I was
No,
down
I
in
know, but I
Memphis.
want to really
Yeah,
walk up to, and thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. What I meant was literally, where were you? What did it feel like? Where was your head as it happened, as opposed to before? I just didn't want to gloss over that.
yeah. I had moved to Memphis, and
Hmm.
I had great friends back in the Northeast,
Hmm.
but none of them were within so many miles of me.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't have an identity. I was
Hmm.
trying to build one. I was still struggling quite a bit with medication,
Hmm.
having bad side effects, having no real effect
Hmm.
of progress. Um, and I tried my best to fit in. I had spent 2 weeks there, or like a week and a half there
Hmm.
when I was interviewing for the job. And so when I moved back down there, I was living with the guy who started the organization. He started
Hmm.
Inner City Rugby.
Hmm.
And I had one other roommate,
Hmm.
and I tried my best to make it work. I didn't have any engagements for like the first few days,
Hmm.
but I went down to Beale Street and I took in like the acrobats and the jazz people,
Hmm.
and watched some blues singers,
Hmm.
and um, went to a different little concert, alternative rock concert.
Yeah.
I was just trying to keep myself busy.
Hmm.
But I had so much anxiety,
Hmm.
and when you're struggling with like suicidal depression, the worst thing you can do is take yourself away from your support network.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I had done.
Right.
And so when I woke up on that fourth morning, you know, I had never had a panic attack before.
Hmm.
For all the mental illness I'd experienced, I'd never experienced something like that. And it can
Hmm.
be quite a burden. It can feel like, the walls are closing in on you. And so I just said, let's take more of this. And then I took more, nothing happened. I took more and
Hmm.
more. And, the floodgates opened, and
Ah.
I said, I need to drive home to Connecticut now,
Hmm. Hmm.
1,800 miles.
Hmm.
And so I packed a bunch of my stuff
Hmm.
as quick as I could before my roommates didn't see that I was leaving.
Ah.
I
Okay.
left I left my favorite painting, which is like a Vincent van Gogh
Hmm.
print, Fields of Wheat. And I just got in my car and I
Hmm.
tried to drive, but I was like sweating compulsively, but I was like
Hmm.
freezing. I overdosed on medication.
Hmm.
And once I got to Knoxville, I just called my parents and I was crying, and I got a ticket plane ride home, and my dad had to go pick up my truck and drive that home.
Hmm.
That was pretty much it for a while.
Yes, so that's what. And by the way, I don't mean to be all over the, but I'm just curious. The artwork behind you, is that also the larger one? What? Who's the artist for that photo? No, I'm sorry,
Henri,
not photo.
yeah,
Artwork.
Henri Matisse.
That there's a little bit. It's not necessarily a Van Gogh-ish sort of look, but it's a cool look, though. I guess in
Yeah, they
terms of
were the
like,
same era. Like they,
right.
I read a lot about Gertrude Stein, and
Hmm.
she kind of had this parlor that all the famous artists of the time and writers,
Hmm.
Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Picasso, everyone went into their parlor. But sorry, not the same era as Van Gogh.
No, but
But
no. But I get it. But I
but
love the
yeah,
story. I just
yeah,
I love the way you light up when you tell it,
yeah,
and to me, and that's the kind of stuff that it's like I'm always curious in regards to like the way that people feel things. And
yeah,
typically it just look at them sometimes. And folks, if you're listening to this podcast, I'll wildly encourage you to also go to our YouTube channel here and check out the show, and you'll check out the artwork that I'm visually
yeah.
looking
There's a
at.
lot of other great paintings in my
Mhm.
room too. I come from a family of artists, so.
Ah, now have you ever done that? I mean, you're an author, but have you
Yeah.
ever dabbled?
Yeah. Painting was how, I didn't find writing until last year. And painting was how
Mhm.
I expressed myself for the years that I was off the rugby field. It, kept my mind silent,
Hmm.
and I was able to focus on one thing, which is rare for someone like me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But wildly impressive nonetheless. So you knew it was time to come home, so to speak, at least for now. And your dad literally drives your truck back home and what have you. Walk me through the process for you of, in essence, the recovery, so to speak, the bounce back.
Yeah. Um, well, it was rough for a while after
Hmm.
that. When I would walk my dog, I would just kind of see myself hanging from a tree pretty much
Mm,
every day for months.
mm, hmm hmm
And, you know, I rarely left bed. If I was walking the dog, it was a good day.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Tried to do some stonemason work for my best
hmm
friend's business.
hmm
That was good,
hmm
but I needed some real help. So finally we went to the ER and got me into a mental health hospital.
hmm
And that was a healing experience. And it
hmm
was an experience that um, brought to light a lot of the, you know, blessings that I have relative
hmm
to, people that suffer a lot worse than me, people that have things like schizophrenia or,
hmm
my roommate there had aphasia, which means he's
mm,
got difficulty speaking.
hmm
But I got him to speak for the first time in a couple weeks, which was pretty big.
Let me ask
And
you how. How did you think you did it? I'm familiar with aphasia, and there's been episodes within my family, so I'm very curious as to what you think it was.
I think he found himself comfortable with me. I tried a bunch of times.
Hmm.
I would
It
just
ain't
try and
easy.
talk to him. It's not easy, but um, it can be a lonely place. So I
Hmm
think when you find someone that you're comfortable with,
hmm
it can
hmm
be really beneficial. And I hope I was beneficial to him because he was really beneficial to me.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah, and just the fact that you give somebody at least a little bit. To me, I couldn't imagine a much more frustrating existence than knowing your thoughts and being unable to articulate your thoughts.
Yeah.
So I applaud or acknowledge at least the sense that you gave that to that person. I think that's beautiful. So now things are starting to move a little bit more in your favor. And in terms of just your own sense of self, and what do you think it was for you that enabled you to build the momentum to keep going, not just to get going, to keep going?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I still struggle every day.
You're
Life
human.
is not easy when you have bipolar 1 disorder.
Hmm
Um, but I don't know. I found that there was still things that I wanted to do. I
hmm
found that there were still things that I was capable of.
hmm
Um, and finding writing was so huge for me,
Mm,
because I was like a ship lost in the night before that.
right?
Um, and it's brought me a bit of a purpose. I have
hmm
people that love what I create and
hmm
people that find, you
hmm
know, inspiration in what I write.
hmm
And, um, I'm making an impact, albeit small, but, I think that, I've got bipolar people who
hmm
get lunch with me because they want to hear about what's worked for me.
hmm
And, that's a really rewarding experience.
hmm
So I hope to do more of that. But yeah, I'm still struggling every day, definitely.
hmm So I at 1000% acknowledge you and acknowledge that. You explained briefly the writing style in the sense of going to your notes section of your phone. I'm always curious. I'm listening to somebody currently who's been around forever talking about the differences in actually speaking a book. John Maxwell is who I'm referring to, where he talks about the differences between, and who has written, I can't remember the quantity, it's crazy the number of books he's written. And John Maxwell has acknowledged that his first several, in his mind, weren't very good, but they still were published and they still went out, which helped him tremendously. How did you write the book literally? Were you speaking into the notes section? Did you
No.
write words? I just am curious of your style.
Yeah, no. I mean, the first draft went up on Instagram on the Notes app.
Right.
And that was 2 months. Thankfully, in the most perverse way, I had been working at the largest cybersecurity company in the world, and I
Okay.
was doing well. But
Mm.
when I went manic upon rupturing my second patellar
Right.
tendon, I sent an email to the wrong person and was fired. I was fired the same week
Oh,
that I
okay.
finished the first draft,
Mm-hmm.
and that enabled me to spend 6 months on editing. So then I moved it from the Notes app to
Mm-hmm.
Word, and got a friend who was a structural editor who did a great job.
Mm-hmm.
But it really came to me pretty naturally. I didn't
Mm.
really have much writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like, you know, a divine sort of like intuition that just
Mm-hmm.
kept me turning the page each time.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, it was weird. It was a period of incredible productivity for me.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I woke up and I knew exactly what to do.
Wow.
And that's a great feeling.
Mm-hmm.
When you take away the end of that, and now I don't have, I'm working on a second book, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't come as easy as the first one, as your life story. So it's a little difficult, but I'm getting through it.
I can't imagine that it would. I mean, I think about like from a music perspective and the incredible first releases when they used to call them albums, the first album, you know what I mean? And they're massive hits for a lot of people. And then you kind of come back and do it again. And you just described it perfectly. The first one has so much of you in it that you're just not just that you're telling your life story. I so acknowledge this. Uh, for you that knew, and I can't imagine that I can't just gloss over the fact that, as you said, every day you woke up and knew what to do. I'll add one more thing to that because it happened, and that's the only reason I don't have to guess it. You actually did it. So that to me is such, like I said, an astounding accomplishment simply in the fact that you did it. So, what do you think kept you doing it? Even though you woke up with a sense of purpose and stuff, it's still something else to actually go do the work. What was it in you?
Um, well, honestly, I had been keeping my Instagram followers,
Hmm.
abreast to everything that was going on.
Okay.
And they kind of kept me accountable in that,
Hmm.
like, they had expectations that I was going to do this thing. And
Hmm.
I had, that same chip on my shoulder that had to
Ah.
prove
Ah.
everything to rugby players.
Hmm.
I had to prove to the world that I could finish
Hmm.
this and
Hmm.
that it would be good and all of that sort of stuff.
Do you think it's a rugby thing or a Tyler thing? That chip on your shoulder.
Um, I think it's just a competitor thing. I
Hmm.
think I'm a
Hmm.
competitor. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have the Mamba mentality, like Kobe Bryant.
Ah,
Like,
I got you.
you know,
That's beautiful. Now, I'm just curious again, when you worked with this editor who was like a structural editor, if I heard you correctly, that's helping. When the editor was done, by the way, this is a very selfish question I'm asking. Uh, One more person who was on the verge of, finishing a book. So I'm asking for me. So as much to when the structural editor was done, in your mind, was it your book or the editor's?
no, I mean, I was the one who made every single change.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
every word typed was my word. Um, he was there, and he wasn't there all the way to the end because the
Hmm.
structure is different than, grammar, tense, and line editing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, what he did was he got me to think beyond the narrative
Hmm.
and consider introspection, but also, how other people might have felt in different situations. Um, and so the book,
Hmm.
was kind of just a sequence of events before him,
Hmm.
and that took it to the next level. Like,
Hmm.
because a lot of times my illness would be dormant from the words on the page, but it wouldn't be dormant from my life. So I had to make sure to kind of keep that underlying theme,
Hmm.
within each passage.
So the day-to-day stuff that you were describing, not dormant, but dormant in your life. How were you able to in essence, was it the competitor part? Was it simply the part I'm going to get done, or was there something that you were able to lean into that helped you merge those two? so that it worked?
No, I mean, it took a lot of reflection. It
Hmm.
took a lot of like, you know, hard swallows and understanding
Hmm.
that, the story is beyond just what happened.
Hmm.
It's about how it happened and what we were thinking when it
Hmm.
happened, what others were thinking when it happened,
Hmm.
and I knew there was something missing when it's just narrative, but
Hmm.
it really, developed, with his help, I'd say.
That's awesome. So the book's done, and right before publish, you've really, in essence, now you've had your Instagram following, so you've been giving previews, so to speak, in terms of the way that you've lived your life and the events that have occurred. But now it's a complete, here's my life story, so to speak, so far. Here's my life story with all the bumps and bruises and way more than bumps and bruises for you. What did it feel like before it went out for you?
Um, Anxiety,
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm always gonna want more. I'm
Hmm.
always gonna be disappointed in results.
Okay.
That's why I'm not really checking the book sales. I know that a lot of
Yeah.
people have read it already and finished
Hmm.
it and written great reviews on
Hmm.
Amazon.
Hmm.
It's 5 stars still, and
Hmm.
it was best selling in like 3 categories.
Ah.
Might only be
Hmm.
just be
Hmm.
the rugby category now. Um, but anticipation is something I
Hmm.
was thinking. How will the world accept
Hmm.
this?
Hmm.
How will the people in my life accept this? You know, it's it's tough on the mentals because
Hmm.
I'm sharing my craziness with the world. I'm
Right.
sharing my illness with the world, and a
Hmm.
lot of people don't do that.
Hmm.
Um, what I realized in the mental institution was that most people don't have the blessings that I have. They didn't
Hmm.
come from a wealthy family or an educated family.
Hmm.
They weren't blessed with athleticism and good
Hmm.
looks, and
Hmm.
those things give you so much confidence and such a leg
Hmm.
up on
Hmm.
everyone else in life. And it almost felt like, I had to do this as my responsibility to the
Hmm.
people of my affliction,
Hmm.
um, to give them some hope and to, give them something to say like I'm not alone.
Hmm.
And so that was a big part of it.
Thank you for that part. And I'm going to say this from my personal perspective, which is the reason when we connected, we're lucky. The Tyler and I are connected through a platform and a network called Podmatch. And so that was the reason that he and I connected. So with complete gratitude to the Podmatch team, I'm thrilled about that. But I'll also add, when I read Tyler's bio, it was really important for me to connect for exactly why you just said, which is that I can't I know this and I don't know much about anything, but I'll say I know that you're not alone, Tyler. My God, within people in a really tight sphere of mine, maybe they haven't gone through the extremes that you have gone through, but the fact that you are willing to bare your soul, acknowledge what is real, destigmatize things such as suicide and addiction and mental illness. I can't imagine that this hasn't had a wave yet of relief. It doesn't have to me, it doesn't have to translate into book sales or how many speaking engagements or are you meeting with Oprah, you know what I mean, somewhere yet. But I'm hoping, Tyler, that you get to at least that sense of purpose that you had talked about before, that you lost your identity. Um, has this helped rebuild your identity for you?
Yeah, it's been huge.
What is
It's
your
been huge.
identity? So I'll ask you, what's your identity?
I think I'm a lot of things. I think I'm a cat because I have 9 lives.
Okay.
Um, writing is kind of my
Hmm.
ninth life. I've had pretty much every career under the sun.
Hmm.
Um, and it's time to make this one count, I guess.
Hmm. So what's this one? This
This
life.
one,
What's in this life? What's in store in your mind for you?
I'm just making the world less lonely.
Mm, mm. God, I couldn't imagine anything much more useful than that. Jeez. Um, I'll ask you two more questions. Number one, which is simply this: how do you dive in your world, in your life? How do you identify or define authenticity?
Um, just being like, just so many people are afraid of being themselves. I was afraid for so long,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so liberating when you're finally secure with
Mm-hmm.
yourself enough to show everyone else in the world how beautiful you are.
Mm, mm. I love that. And we will have the Instagram link, but know that how are we getting a hold of you? Your website, obviously. Your website, the Amazon book link,
Yep.
the Instagram page, anywhere else that you would think would
No,
be.
that's it. That's it. Buy my book, learn more about me, and if you want to follow me on Instagram, go for it.
I, I I wasn't sure when we started that you used the word exciting on your website in terms of bio, and I was getting nervous because it was such a tough story, and it is exhilarating to me. It is exciting to me, and it's not just because of the way that you've defined it or explained it. It's just when I see you light up, it's like, okay, it's also real. So. Tyler Kania, I am so grateful to meet you, man. I acknowledge what you've done and more importantly, what you're doing. And to me, it's beautiful. So thank you so much for showing up and shining your light on us. I think
Yeah.
we need it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
100%. Folks, you've just heard another episode of Your Message Received. Keep liking, watching, sharing, telling your friends and family, and we will keep driving content through your front door. John Duffin here, Duffin Media. Thanks so much for showing up for us today. Have a great day, all. Bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.